Welcome back to the Wealthbuilder movement. We are here this night and we are talking all things real estate investing. So I'm going to launch us right into this first segment, which is what is investing about in real estate from a very basic one-on-one perspective. I am here with the Starks. We have Christine Stark from Leverage Property Management Group. Added the group on myself. And then we have William Starks, who is here from G Starks Realty. They are a married couple. And I love it that you both, although you're married, have two individual businesses in a related market. And so I'm going to be picking both of your brains in terms of what those businesses entail and how you can help other individuals that might want to get into them as well. So I'm going to start with you, Christine. And I wondered if you could talk us a little bit about, what is it to really get into real estate investment? What are the main ways that people can invest in real estate, via flipping or rentals or buy and hold? What are the kind of maybe top three ways?
Those are all three good ways to get involved in real estate. I guess the most important thing that you want to look for is the area that you're going to be investing in, what kind of return you're going to get on that investment. When you're doing flips, of course, it takes a little bit more time. We're in a different market right now, so you're not having to hold the property as long. But with rentals, that's a long-term investment, so you plan on holding on to that property for quite a while. So that's a good way to go.
Wow. And then I'm going to flip the question now to you, William, in terms of, let's say I have a little bit of spare change I've saved up. Maybe I own a home. I may not, because nowadays people are kind of jumping right into maybe even commercial investing and before they buy their own home. But I'm really timid because I heard this real estate thing is kind of dangerous. So can you talk to us, maybe share a little bit of your journey in real estate investment? How did you get started? How did you get over those nerves of I could go bankrupt?
Right. So yes. Well, it was really a no-brainer. My mother, when I was little, she was a real estate agent. And my father was a contractor and he built houses and garages. So I was always around it. So just kind of staying around them and seeing the particulars of what goes into it. Then in the early 90s, I was maybe 20, 21, I bought my first investment property. And it was pretty much a lease option purchase. So then after that one right there, I went on to buy a couple more with my mother's help as well. And it made me realize that there's other ways and other options of buying property without using a lot of money. So if anybody that wants to get started, you don't have to have a lot of money. Sometimes it's being creative and finding that investment property. So you don't have to save up to 20% that people say you gotta have. It's more of, let's find something at least option to purchase. Let's find somebody that really just wants to get rid of the house and you wanna give them some rent for a couple of years to get your credit together. So there's quite a few ways of doing it. For me, getting started, it was the least option to purchase way to do it. And I've been in for a while and had the ups and downs in it, but I'm here to tell the story about it.
Okay, so I always find the best way to get over, the nervousness of launching into something new is to kind of hear the gory tales of somebody that has survived. Right. Our previous evening session we talked about different topics and we just talked about risk and especially as it relates to financial and asset planning, but there's definitely risk in the real estate area. Can you maybe detail time where you may have launched into a deal and maybe didn't go so well, but you lived it to deal another day?
Yes. Well, there's several times it happened back in the early 90s. Well, even right now, a couple years ago, we bought a duplex. We bought two duplexes. Well, we bought one right out, and then we did a lease option on the second one. So again, that's another way of, the way of doing it. That second one that we purchased, we really didn't do our due diligence to figure out if it had any things wrong with it. We just took the guy's word. So when we got into it, we realized that one of the tenants had been there over 15 years and he had did his own repairs. So when somebody's been in the house 15 years doing their own repairs, you know that something might be up because you haven't been in there taking a look at it. So we went into that property, and yes, it was. So he's been in there. Still, he's there today, and we still let him do his own repairs because it's going to take so much to get it together that we just decided if he's paying and he's there, we'll just let that one be our, the unicorn.
Yeah.
So we took the one that was right beside it, rehabbed it, and did a great job with that. But it comes with the territory, and sometimes that's what you have to do in real estate. But you always got to find the thin line and the silver lining behind it. So.
Wow. And that, that situation you just described kind of takes me back to this whole concept of property management. And Christine, can you describe, A, what is property management? And B, even if I'm not going through a property management company, if either you hire somebody or you become a property manager, can you talk about, some of the things that people unknowingly get into and not understanding what property management is?
I think one of the things that people decide to manage their own property don't realize is the time that it's going to take. It is going to be a second job for you. You're going to get phone calls in the middle of the night from tenants that have leaky toilets, air conditioners went out, and the tenants expect to have those things resolved immediately. Unrealistically, a lot of times you can't. So that's the biggest thing, is knowing that if you're going to manage your own property, you're going to be having a second job. I always think it's best to hire a property manager. Leverage Property Management, we're a full-service property management company. We handle maintenance requests, we collect rent, deposit those funds back into the tenants, the owner's account. But the biggest thing that we offer those owners is freedom. They don't have to worry about their phone ringing in the middle of the night or tenants being upset with them because their issues aren't being taken care of, because we have the ability in order to address all of those issues. So that's why it's good to have a property manager.
Wow. And speaking of kind of, again, property management, one aspect of not necessarily technically defined as property management, but maintenance of a property is getting into something and not realizing that, you have to have some money to keep up on that side of things as well.
Absolutely. You need to be able to make sure that you're setting that money aside, especially if you're managing yourself. It's easy to collect that rent and just go spend it, on whatever you desire to spend it on. But it's very important to make sure that you take some money and put it aside, because the central area is going to go out. You're going to have a roof leak. You're going to have issues with the toilet where you're going to have to make repairs. So if you're not setting any money aside, you're setting yourself up for a headache later on down the road.
Wow. So William, speaking of headaches, the real estate market right now is great for sellers.
Yes, it is.
Maybe not so good for buyers. But at the same time, has COVID opened up any new deal possibilities? I mean, is there a niche of greatness for somebody in this market, or are we all doomed?
Well, the good part about real estate is it is one of the solid investments that's still around. I mean, the stock market goes up and down, but real estate is still one of the solid investments. So you have a lot of people that are moving from stocks over to investments, just because the simple fact that we're doing so good in investments. On the other side of that this is a new type of market. No one has come across COVID before, so we're still learning as we go to see what's going to happen. But I predict that the housing market is still going to be straight till next year at least. And the money that the government is putting into the system as well is going to help out. So I think we're going to be great with it. There's not a lot of new ways to do real estate, but the old ways are still working. They do have some 100% financing right now that help out. So I think we're doing great with it. We're doing great in real estate. It's going to be here for a while.
Wonderful. So I want to stick with you, William, for a second and ask about, kind of going back to that question about what are the different ways that we can invest. And I know on HGTV, flipping seems to be the only way to go. Is it really as easy money as they make it seem, when they got the twins doing it.
No, it's not that easy.
Man.
But it can be. But I will say when it comes to investing, you got to realize when you start out, and this is where any young investor wants to start out, you gotta start out, what way do I want to do it? Do I want to be an investor and buy and flip, or do I want to be someone that's going to purchase a property and hold on to it? Because that determines what kind of money that you can go out and get. Right now, there's so many avenues of getting money that if you're going to buy a home and flip it, it might be best to get a hard money loan because you're just going to hold on to it for a couple months, maybe 4 months at the most, and then flip it and give them the money back. If you're going to hold on to it and be a renter, be a landlord, then you might want to get that traditional loan and have it for 15, 20 years and pay a small interest rate. So there's ways to do it. You just got to start out in your own lane, and whatever your income and whatever you have saved is what's going to determine. Because if you, like Christine was saying, there's always going to be something that's going to break, the furniture's going to go out, and if you don't have any money starting out, then you might want to flip it, make some money, and then rent out the next one.
Oh, nice. So we're just about out of time, but I want to get into this whole marriage dynamic, because anytime you have a business and you got family business, and although we got two businesses going on here, I am under no delusion that we don't have both hands probably in both businesses, as most families go. I am not married, but I have siblings, and I now have siblings involved in my businesses. And so can you talk about, how is it investing in real estate in the industry as a couple? And this question, of course, is for Christine. And just asking, how is it navigating that? Who's the tiebreaker when there's only two of you?
Well, honestly, it's one of those situations where we both have to agree, because the financial responsibility is going to fall on both of us. And if he thinks it's a great deal and I don't think it's a great deal, then we're not going to push forward on it. And if I think it's a good deal and he doesn't, then we're not going to push on it. We both have to see eye to eye on this, because this is not something that you take lightly. It's a mutual agreement. So, and that's just how we handle it. If we both don't see eye to eye, then it means it's not for us.
Wow. William, does it help that you both are very knowledgeable in the area? It's not like one person you're trying to have to educate them. Does that help?
It does help. And I see that you didn't ask me the answer.
No, I did not ask you that. Well, you can give a response. I saw that you were eager to give a response.
So it does help to have two people that are opposite when it comes to trying to work it out. I'm a person that I've never seen a cliff that I wouldn't jump off of. And she's the one that always walks up to the cliff and got to check the temperature, the height, the width. So we do 90% of the time get into a difficult situation of trying to figure out our best deal.
Oh, okay. Well, different answers, but I would expect nothing less from a married couple. So that's it. We don't have any time left for this particular segment, but please stay tuned. We'll be coming back and going a little bit deeper into Airbnbs and rentals in that industry. So stay tuned. Right after this commercial, we'll be back. Thank you.
We are proud to bring together university resources, Tier 1 level research, and residents as expert collaborators from West Louisville neighborhoods. Why West Louisville? The greatest of all time comes from West Louisville.
Cassius Clay from Louisville, Kentucky. I am the greatest.
Knowledge, resources, and love abound. It's access that we all need. Louisville Change Lab is your connector.
Hello, my name is Ivory Rollins Cross, and it is my pleasure to serve as the director of the Louisville Change Lab.
Welcome back to the Wealthbuilder movement. We are here to discuss how can you buy the block. And we're not just talking about you individually buying a couple of houses, for your family portfolio, but we're really talking about how do we be part, especially as African Americans, part of revitalization of a whole neighborhood that has perhaps been disenfranchised over the years. And so I am so happy to be here with Yvonne Smith, who is the CEO and president of One West, which is a nonprofit org here in Louisville, Kentucky. And I'm of course gonna have Yvonne give more details about what One West is in a moment, but the topics that we'll be covering here go so far beyond that because Yvonne actually has a background. She's relatively, I'm gonna still say relatively new to this part of the country, but she's been doing this for many, many, many years. And so she has a wealth of knowledge on how to participate in revitalization and how to do, I don't know if that's even a term, responsible gentrification. Maybe that's not a term, but what is the difference between the two? And I think that's gonna be my first question. Revitalization versus gentrification. I think a lot of us are getting tripped up on that terminology. Is there a difference? What is the difference? Which one is more socially responsible?
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you so much, Dr. Angela Johnson. I always love when I get the call from you because I know there's always going to be a good conversation about how we can help our community. I will also say that One West is a nonprofit that was developed by the 2014 Bingham Fellows class, and it was a class comprised of people from across the city, including the West End. I love to say Woody Porter was the visionary behind what could happen in the West End, along with other leaders that have come up with a great plan. And we are operating on a 5-year strategic plan. To your question, the main reason that this class determined that they wanted to work on the West End was because they saw the disinvestment that had occurred. Woody's dream was that the West End would come back to the vibrancy that it once had, and that families would be uplifted and small businesses would be undergirded to be successful. But what we found were a number of things. There were significant vacant and abandoned properties. There were significant challenges that are germane to Kentucky, whereby that the residential properties are required to pay their taxes. In so doing, many of them had to go seek resources, many times predatory lenders, to finance those taxes. As a result, you have many families with multiple liens on their properties by companies that are quickly escalating the price of that investment or that loan. And so those families are really hogtied from being able to divest themselves of the property and or earn real equity in their property because it's being siphoned off in those loans. So that's just one. The other thing that we started to see was on the commercial property, that there were so many absentee landlords and so many of our renters, our business renters, were not in a position to buy those properties, nor were many of those landlords making the kinds of improvements and maintenance that needed to be done. So when we get into the issue of gentrification and responsible revitalization, you can't gentrify what's not there. So in some cases, with over 5,000 vacant and abandoned units, there's an opportunity to put those properties back in play and to have people move into those properties. Does that mean that those people will be the same race, socioeconomic level as the people that are there? No, you really can't guard for that. But when we talk to the community during our 2018, 2019, 2020 period around looking into what the community's concerns were around gentrification, and we did a national conference on it. The community's concern was forced displacement. People want the right to retain the historic values of their neighborhoods and also the camaraderie between neighbors and the history of multi-generational ownership and or renting in certain communities. There's a culture there that is very proud culture here in Louisville. So we knew that it was important to protect for that as much as we can in responsible revitalization. But it also means not coming into a community and doing something that the community community is not comfortable with. So listening to folks, getting people from multiple cultures and generations around the table, that is how we do community economic development. So when opportunities come up, we're not at a loss for, what does the community want to do? We know the community wants resources to revitalize certain areas and to improve the commercial fabric of the area and to entice businesses to come to the area. People have told us over and over again, they don't want to have to go all the way to Indiana, all the way out to Bardstown Road for different resources. Why can't those resources be in the West End? We have beautiful property, we have beautiful location, we have great logistic locations in proximity to downtown. We should have great viable retail in our communities, and we should have great options on housing.
Wow. And so my next question is really about how can we, as Black families, Black individuals, how can we participate? Because I know a lot of, people I've been talking to around the nation, my friends, my peers even, are saying, hey, clearly we see revitalization is coming down, or we may even see, in many cases, you see gentrification is coming down the road. Mm-hmm. And so they're saying, hey, I'm actually going to intentionally buy into a neighborhood that I see is being gentrified, not only because it's a great financial investment, mm-hmm. but because I more so represent, of course, you may or may not be from the community. In some cases, people are going back home, right?
That's
so maybe
right.
where their parents used to live on.
Right.
But I more so identify with that community, mm-hmm. and more likely as a homeowner in that community to put my money, vote on legislation that would bring, grocery stores and resources to that community. Right. So if I am an individual and I want to, make sure that I combat the negative aspects, that can happen when you see gentrification, what are some things you would suggest to an individual who's looking to buy a property, maybe a rental, maybe a home for themselves? Right. How do I assess where to invest my money? And in terms of this, we're all building wealth here. How far out can I see gentrification coming so that maybe I can invest early enough, because sometimes we don't have the wealth to get in the game when it's already popping, right? They want to invest early. So how do I know if a neighborhood is, under the threat of gentrification and it's a good opportunity for me to come in early and do my part, build some wealth, and also lean more towards revitalization?
Well, I will say, number one, first let me say, the interest that we have is in community economic development, helping to see to it that those that are there benefit from their local economy and their local community. So we are focused on helping homeowners who are there stay there and build wealth and multi-generational wealth at that. And then we are also recognizing that we need to really study this issue of renters, how not to displace renters who want to be there. But when you start looking at the wealth creation component, people are already doing just what you're saying. A lot of times our community is the first to disregard the number of Black investors that are already coming to the community. There are many ways to do it. They can do it individually by looking at homes that are available with realtors. But I always like for people to think about, look at the banks that are foreclosing on properties or that have foreclosures. They want to unload those properties. And so that's another way for people to look at it. So then there's the other option of groups. Groups can invest together, but I don't want people to miss the fact that we have a large number, and I'm excited about this, of minority individuals investing in the West End. And because of family ties and also historical aspects, they understand the value of that. And so they're building their wealth by making those investments. And I'm meeting more young people that are doing that. And when I say young people, under 35.
Yeah, and predominantly we have, primarily we have a very millennial audience with the Wealthbuilder movement. And, we've been talking a lot about, Louisville and the West End of Louisville. And for those, again, our audience members that may not be familiar, the West End of Louisville is a historically Black part of town and predominantly Black part of town even today. But we know in every city, the one you're in has such a neighborhood, a disenfranchised neighborhood, where there's, an opportunity for revitalization, a need for revitalization, but also to protect the interests of those that are living in those communities that have been there, for generations. So as we talk about this, and we only have time for one last question, but you have not only been based in Louisville, did you see the same things in Ohio? And what are some tips, some kind of last minute advice you would give to anybody, irregardless of the city, because you've kind of been to a few different cities,
yes,
and seen, what the landscape is and how to kind of responsibly do this investing. Can you give any last minute tips for those that want to form maybe one of those investment groups or want to, become another one of those Black wealth builders that are getting into these properties?
Well, I will say that my work in North Carolina has been over the span of 30 years, and I've seen a lot. I was just telling a young man that by the time I was 35, I had 10 properties myself. And being a single mom at that time, it was very interesting. I was buying estate properties. So as estates were for being foreclosed on, or as the estates were selling off properties, I was able to buy. So I think that it is imperative that people begin to think about the long-range plan, because it definitely is happening all over the country. And one of the great things about Louisville is because we still have neighborhoods that are untouched or untapped, that means there's a lot of opportunity. But I think if people think about how to invest in the community and be a positive impact on that community and a fabric of the community, that's the best way to do it, because I think then you are value added. Responsible revitalization is extremely important, and doing the research to understand what those neighborhoods have been through and how you can positively affect change with them, not for them, is important.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Yvonne. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, not only that you generated here in Louisville, that you brought to Louisville from North Carolina, but also nationally. I know you're doing stuff as well. So we're so grateful to have you. Stay tuned. We will be back. Continue to enjoy and watch the Wealth Builder movement.
Hello, I'm Timothy Findley Jr. The Louisville Change Lab has taken the incubation model and enhanced it through innovation and outreach to the West Louisville community. We at Life Development Corporation are thankful to be a part of this transcendent initiative with the University of Louisville Change Lab.
We are proud to bring together university resources, Tier 1 level research, and residents as expert collaborators from West Louisville neighborhoods. Why West Louisville? The greatest of all time comes from West Louisville.
Cassius Clay from Louisville, Kentucky. I am the greatest.
Knowledge, resources, and love abound. It's access that we all need. Louisville Change Lab is your connector.
Hello, my name is Ivory Rollins Cross, and it is my pleasure to serve as the director of the Louisville Change Lab.
The Wealth Builder movement isn't about money, it's about peace of mind, hope for the future, and fulfilling your God-given purpose. You are a wealth builder. You're looking to launch a new business, invest in your community, make systemic change, and actionable plans. You are a wealth builder, but you can't do it alone. Join Wealth Builder Movement, an online collective advancing Black and brown wealth together. By joining our Facebook group and YouTube channel, you will learn from, invest with, and leverage others. Wealth is a group activity. Work, create, and build with others. Join the movement, the Wealth Builder movement.
Welcome back to the Wealth Builder Movement. For this final segment of the evening, I am excited to talk about Airbnbs and rentals. I know a lot of us are either in the game or trying to get in the game. I'm trying to get in the game. So I am here with Ricky Mason from Brainstem University. And I'll say that's his, I want to say day job, but it's a whole company that I hopefully get a little bit of information on today. And I'm also here with Louis Legier from Legier Investments. And I am so excited to be here with both of you. So Louis is joining us virtually. I'm going to start with Ricky in terms of the questioning, and then I'm going to pull Louis in. And Louis is actually, I'm just going to keep it real with y'all. He has been so generous to give us time while he's on vacation. So you know he's a serious wealth builder, very serious about encouraging and helping other wealth builders. So you don't want to miss a word of what he has to say this evening. So Ricky, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us about how you got into the rental game? And maybe even tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey, and does it tie in somewhere with the real estate journey?
I guess I'll start with being in DC. I was living in DC and I was making a pretty good salary, and I said, well, I'm tired of paying rent. Why don't I just buy? And I realized I couldn't buy in DC. I was just priced out of most of the market, and I didn't have a solid enough credit history, being 21, right out of college, trying to buy a new property. But moving forward with that journey, I started doing research, and I read the book, How to Think Like a Millionaire. And that book showed me, first off, that most millionaires were millionaires because of real estate. And that was kind of my first kind of jump into that. And so moving back to Kentucky, I said, well, real estate is going to be my bread and butter. But getting to that point was a lot of sacrifices. So in college, I made sure that I had great internships that paid well, and I saved my money there. When I moved to DC, I lived in a basement apartment for the first year, paying $800, everything included. My car was paid off at that point, so I was able to save $2,000 a month while I was working in DC. And when I came back to Kentucky, I started using that money to invest in real estate.
Wow. And I have family that lives in DC. That's kind of our de facto holiday place. And so, DC's really expensive. Yeah. So it sounds like it prepared you well for when you came to Louisville. You're like, oh, well, I'm buying the whole block. I can afford this. Give me everything. So another question I have for you, Ricky, is, given that, right? You were so young when you got into real estate investment. I mean, you're still relatively young, but so that tells our audience, you were really young getting into it. Did you have any fear when you were young, or was it because you were young, you didn't have the fear? You just kind of said, hey, I'm going to take this book and just go.
After I read the book, I said, if majority of millionaires are doing this and I'm going to be a millionaire, I'm going to have to figure it out and make it work. And coming back to Louisville, seeing the price of property, I bought the first property, which was a duplex, for $12,000. So that was an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. But I had known in college that that was something that I want to do. My senior year, the guy that we rented our house from was a young guy, about 30, I would say at the time. But he's like, man, this is my daughter's college fund that you all are paying down right now. And I was like, oh man, that's so genius. And I'm like, so that kind of set me on the journey of it and thinking in that mindset.
Wow. So I'm going to ask you one more question. I'm going to kick it to Louis Legier next. But you mentioned, being, renting from somebody who was talking about, this is my daughter's college fund. You have kids now. Yeah. We had a whole segment yesterday evening about legacy wealth, but just as it relates to generational wealth, are you thinking about that when you think about your investment portfolio?
Yeah, definitely. Especially when I first got started, I said, oh man, at least one of these houses is going to be for each one of the boys. But as that's kind of growing, I think my vision is kind of growing for them. It's kind of, now that I'm in the startup space and entrepreneurial space, it's like each one of these businesses is going to be for the boys. But definitely they were there during the journey. I had them there while we were working in painting houses. My wife was there in the house painting with me, working as we put in sweat equity in these properties.
Wow. So a true family business. Yeah. Louis, I'm going to kick it to you because you have an amazing story as well. not only an amazing entrepreneurial journey, but also an amazing real estate investment journey. And I was wondering if you could give us some background. Of course, you're no stranger to the Wealth Builder movement, but I also wanted to, for those audience members that may not have heard your story before, could you give us a little bit about, how you got into the real estate investment game and how you kind of came up through the entrepreneurial track to make that happen?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me on here. I'm glad to be here. You guys always do a great job kind of informing the community of what's happening. My story is similar to what sounds like Ricky's. I mean, we all have, a background, and we're trying to do something different for our family. I mean, in '92, I did the came from Haiti thing on the boat, and then spent a year in a detention camp, and then just grew my way up from the $8 an hour job, and then just learned what I had to learn and grew within a company. And then I just caught on to the entrepreneur bug, right? So I wanted to focus on breaking the poverty mindset and just straight poverty that was within my family. I mean, we've always done our best to survive and deal with what we had, but I want to have a different future for my kids, future kids. I want them to see different. So entrepreneurship allows me that opportunity. And certainly real estate, as Ricky mentioned, I mean, if 80, 90% of all millionaires are made through real estate, at some point you just start paying attention, right? So you don't have to reinvent the wheel sometimes. Sometimes you just got to follow the playbook.
Both of you had that same kind of awakening that, 80, 90% of millionaires, you cannot become a millionaire if you're not in real estate, And we know, we're being facetious, of course, we know that there are many ways that people become millionaires. But what I'm hearing from both of you is that, you cannot deny that I think it's like over 80% of the wealth in the United States of America comes from real estate. I think it may even be over 90% comes from real estate investment. So I want to focus us a little bit more specifically now on the rental game, because both of you in different ways, some ways the same, but in different ways, as I want to emphasize, are in the rental game. So Louis is in the rental game on the Airbnb side. You may also have Airbnbs as well, I'm not familiar with, but you certainly had rentals. And so I want to start with Ricky in terms of asking, what was your first rental property like? How did you find property management of that? And what are some things you think people should be keeping in mind when they're out here buying rentals and trying to manage tenants? My first property, as I mentioned before, I bought that one for like $12,000. Put in sweat equity. I think we bought about $2,000 to $3,000 in material, but I learned how to work on houses. I learned plumbing in that house. I learned how to lay carpet in that house. I learned drywall in that house. I learned a lot about the process of renovating a property in that property. I mean, and we got that rented for $1,100. 3 months later, got that rented for $1,100, and I had the bug then, so I bought the next one, a duplex in Old Louisville. Got a heck of a deal on that one, around $30K. And that one was the biggest project to date, I guess, still. But that was a complete reno from homeless people living in the first floor when I bought it. The second floor didn't need as much work, but we had to do the full deal, all furnaces, all hot water heaters, plumbing, electric. Rentals, I think I chose rentals over like flipping or something like that, just because I felt like the equity that I was gaining in the property and the monthly income, like I'm winning twice. Like I'm getting paid every month and I'm growing equity and wealth. So that's kind of what led me into rentals over some of the other options. Oh, wow, that's great. So I'm going to Louis Legere now, and I'm going to be asking you as well, kind of what was your first rental, and then how did you end up in the Airbnb game? And then tell our audience, because some people just have maybe one house, maybe a bedroom, maybe two houses that they're doing Airbnb. You have multiple floors of massive buildings so you were really in it. So tell us a little bit about your first rental, and then how you got into Airbnbs, and then why you've chosen to scale it so much.
Yeah, so my first rental I bought about 6 years ago. I still own it to this day. It's on the east end of Louisville, but I was going to all the classes, reading all the books, listening to all the YouTube videos, and the one consistent thing that everybody kept saying is just get started. I mean, get started, because what you learn, doing it'll always be more than what you can read about. So that property there I still own and had tenants in it for all 6 years, just signed up another 5-year tenant. And that house there taught me most of the things I know in real estate. I mean, I learned how to deal with things. I learned how to communicate with tenants. I learned how to find tenants. I learned how to weed through the applications and things of that nature. So I do have some long-term investments as far as real estate. And then for the short term, we're now currently up to 50 units and we're climbing. We want to get to different, right now we're downtown Louisville around all the destination areas. We want to get to other areas in our city as far as like places that people will visit. So we have a national/international plan, Lord willing, that we want to grow to and be to. So myself and my company, we're big on fixing a need. I mean, as I was traveling West Coast, East Coast, international, I just saw that we didn't have the short-term rentals at scale in Louisville, Kentucky. So if there's a problem and I'm trying to talk to others about, hey, we should do, short-term rentals at scale. And at that time, the banks just didn't quite understand and still learning what that was. So there's only so many times that a person like me will ask. At some point, you just go off on your own and do it on your own. So I started self-funding one by one, and then now we're up to the 50 and looking to get more in the upcoming weeks, months, and years.
Wow, that's amazing. So started with one, all the way up to 50, on your way to a national plan in this area. I mean, that's just phenomenal. I mean, both of you are just doing things, and again, both of you started very young. And I keep emphasizing that because just like people say, hey, if you're gonna, start saving for retirement, if you're only invested in a mutual fund, at this age or that age, people have to understand real estate is the same. If you only get in early enough, you take that equity that you get from your early deals and it just starts compounding, and then you get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger deals, and you end up with, 50 Airbnb units and a whole national plan. So I think that's phenomenal. Well, we don't have much time left, so I kind of wanted to get from each of you, I'll start with Ricky, really briefly. Can you give maybe one or two actionable things that somebody watching today could do if they want to launch into the rental industry?
Yeah, I mean, first off start figuring out what you can sacrifice and where you can save more money. Having that down payment to get into that first rental is going to be great. Or if you're young, kind of like we were when we got started, house hacking is a key. Or even renting a property and renting out rooms to your roommates. If you can leverage your credit or your high income to rent a 4-bedroom rental and rent out 3 of those rooms, then you just decreased your expenses right there. So start figuring out ways that you can increase your income so that you can have a down payment for that rental, however you're going to do that. Secondly, just start figuring out what type of lifestyle you want in the real estate market. If you want to do rentals, I chose that because that's long-term money. I'm making money monthly, but I'm also growing equity as they pay down my mortgage monthly. Or if you want to get into flips, which I think a lot of people try to jump into that and they're like, okay, I'm going to make a lot of money at one time. But when you're doing those flips, you got to realize that that's like a 6 to 8 month maybe plan that you're on. So they made 100,000 in maybe 8 months or a year working on that flip. So you got to kind of put all that into perspective when you're kind of thinking about getting into real estate.
Wow, that's some really great advice. Louis, do you have any last words kind of in terms of advice for those that want to get into the Airbnb business? What are the different ways that they could do that?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest advice I'd give to everybody is, I know this is the Wealth Builders Conference, right? But you got to figure out what your definition of wealth is. I mean, not everybody wants to be a millionaire. You could just aspire to give your family a better life. So from the short-term rental business, you don't have to think, okay, well, I can't get to 50, right? You got to simplify the business model and just think, okay, a lot of people actually, one of the most profitable areas in short-term rentals is actually renting out a couch or a room. It's not actually a whole apartment or a whole house. So you start small where you can rent out a couch, you can rent out a room on your property, and to where you get income coming in that way. And, you charge $35, $50 a night and get a few bookings a week. And then that way you can generate cash, and then you can kick over to Ricky's plan because that helps you get the down payment to actually acquire a property at that point, right? So Both plans are great. You just got to figure out your definition of wealth. But most importantly, it's about taking care of yourself and your family and then get started. I mean, putting it off and putting it off, eventually you're losing, time that's very valuable to you and your family.
So takeaway for the night, get started, stop putting it off, jump in, don't worry. So I'm so glad that you both have joined me for this evening segment. And I want to encourage our audience to please stay tuned. Tomorrow evening, we're going to be talking about entrepreneurship. We're becoming the entrepreneurship ecosystem for Black businesses. We're going to be talking about how do you launch a business. And we're even going to be talking about how do you go from a concept to a corporation. So we'll see you again tomorrow night. Stay tuned and continue building wealth.
We are proud to bring together university resources, Tier 1 level research, and residents as expert collaborators from West Louisville neighborhoods. Why West Louisville? The greatest of all time comes from West Louisville.
Cassius Clay from Louisville, Kentucky. I am the greatest.
Knowledge, resources, and love abound. It's access that we all need. Louisville Change Lab is your connector.
Hello, my name is Ivory Rollins Cross, and it is my pleasure to serve as the director of the Louisville Change Lab.
The Wealthbuilder movement isn't about money, it's about peace of mind, hope for the future, and fulfilling your God-given purpose. You are a wealth builder. You're looking to launch a new business, invest in your community, make systemic change, and actionable plans. You are a wealth builder, but you can't do it alone. Join Wealthbuilder Movement, an online collective advancing Black and brown wealth together. By joining our Facebook group and YouTube channel, you will learn from, invest with, and leverage others. Wealth is a group activity. Work, create, and build with others. Join the movement, the Wealthbuilder Movement.